Hello, everyone, and welcome to a brand new episode of the Kistler O'Brien podcast. I'm Tyler Trumbauer with Kistler O'Brien Fire Protection. And before we get into today's episode, if you missed any of our previous episodes, be sure to catch up on those on our YouTube channel. Search us there, Kistler O'Brien Fire Protection, or you could search us in your favorite podcast feed, KOB Podcast, such as Apple or Spotify. You can check out all of our previous episodes and great conversations with our guests there. We have another great conversation on tap for today as we're going to dive into a little bit more about portable fire extinguishers. That's at the heart of Kistler O'Brien. It's been in our blood since we started in the early 1930s, and that's going to be the focal point of today's conversation as we talk to one of our great partners from Amerex, and Chris Bullock joining me here today on the KOB podcast. Chris, thank you so much for a few minutes of your time and joining us on the podcast today.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Tyler. I appreciate it.
Sure thing. So let's get started to just learn a little bit more about you. You're currently the regional sales manager for Amerex. What does that role entail other than, joining, critically acclaimed podcasts like this one? What else does that kind of do? And expand on that for those that may not know the name and the brand. What does Amerex do in the industry?
Sure. So Amerex has been around since 1971, and we're a manufacturer of hand portable and wheeled fire extinguishers, in addition to fire suppression systems and gas detection systems for different industries and markets like kitchen, vehicle, and industrial applications.
Okay.
And then my role with Amerex, so I'm the Northeast sales manager, so I cover the Northeast U.S. for Amerex. And, that typically entails things, overseeing the entire distribution network and the Amerex brand on a whole in the Northeast. That could include things like training distributors, partners like yourselves, field support, order support, things of that nature, anything that they may need. But also in addition to working with end users to help get the Amerex product spec'd, or just out there in the market in general.
And you yourself have been in the life safety industry for years, obviously with Amerex, but even beforehand, and
Sure.
I think fire service and just kind of all that stuff. So kind of color between the lines there. Give us a glimpse into your overall background in the industry and maybe what motivated you to spend your life in the industry in these variety of roles.
Yeah, so I've been in the fire and life safety industry since 2004, so a little over 20 years here. Started with the fire department, so I've been a firefighter for over 20 years, and then got into the business side of that in 2006, working for a distributor that sold largely on municipal product supply, so directly to fire departments. That included fire extinguishers, so that's where I really got my hands wet in the fire extinguisher world, but also things like fire hose, nozzles, any type of waterway stuff, a variety of applications. Worked there for a while, about 15 years, moved on to a different space in the fire market, more unique lighting for fire trucks. Did that for a couple years with a manufacturer until moving on into Amerex directly. Been with Amerex for about 2 years now.
So we talked a lot of folks in our recruiting efforts about being a volunteer firefighter and then making that your full-time job, protecting and saving lives as your full-time job. You were someone that went across that bridge, like you mentioned, and made it your full-time role getting into the business side of this industry. What would you say to those folks that maybe want to scratch that itch even further and kind of just take it from part-time volunteer firefighter to making it their 9 to 5 as well?
Sure. I mean, obviously there's a lot of passion in the fire service industry, and I think that's when, people definitely when they first start in the volunteer service or even as a career part-time basis, they catch that bug, and this just kind of, really lends to making that their career as well. And that's where it was for me when I started in as a professional career with this. I wasn't kind of sure where it was going to take me, and I had a reference from a friend who was working at a company that came in, and once I got my foot in the door, it was great. I mean, it was, there's good and bad side to having your entire world, entrenched in the fire service, but I loved it, and was able to satisfy both sides as far as being able to do the fire department thing and then come and work and helping on the flip side of the coin as well.
Yeah, certainly. And now the last 2 years, like you said, with Amerex, you're talking fire extinguishers, the ones we got right behind us. Absolutely. And many others, like you mentioned, wheeled units. Our shop works on those weekly around here for our customers across the region. So let's dive into those portables a little bit more. I feel like I'll call them folks that are outside the industry, right? And even myself, who was not in the industry until joining Kistler O'Brien Fire Protection, like when you thought fire protection and safety, you thought a fire extinguisher, right? That's probably the most notable thing. That's something that you learn in school, kind of the pass method, all of that kind of stuff. But there's so many like nuances to it that like nobody knows about. And we get a lot of those calls from folks that want to start a food truck or an eatery, and they're like, I need to have a Class K, I need this here, I need that. And it's like, what have you noticed when educating folks is kind of those biggest educational gaps from like the typical ABC they're seeing, the different sizes, and like you said, then we can go even to levels that I have no idea about with, what agents in for what thing, the wheeled units, and the real industrial uses of these.
Sure. Yeah, I think it's important to, when you're talking to these folks, to identify what they're trying to achieve. And, even down to, are they just looking to meet a minimum standard, or are they looking to actually have some, decent and superior fire protection for whatever application they're in? And, there's always people out there that I'll call them box checkers, and people that are actually want to do something, for, fire protection and life safety, and so you're going to have those two different groups of people out there. But you're right, there's a wide berth of options, and people can get lost in the weeds with those options very easily. So I think it's important to understand what they're trying to do, how passionate they feel about protecting either the property that they've got, their employees, their the life that they've got working around them, and then kind of expand on that from there. I think a lot of people get hung up, like you said, on just the traditional offerings, and people would love to see kind of one fire extinguisher, and hey, that covers me for every type of hazard that I've got in my building or my food truck. And unfortunately, it's not, that simple most of the time. And education is key. So I think just talking through that with folks to understand, what their true goal is here and what hazards are presented in their everyday environment of what they're working, and how can we best fill those voids.
Sure. And another thing that we notice with fire extinguishers as well is folks don't realize in the commercial space that you need them inspected yearly, that it's not a one-time purchase, especially not a one-time purchase from like a Home Depot type of one, that you need, they're usually getting ones with the plastic nozzles that are single use, they can't be refilled. And I think, folks maybe just think about fire safety from the residential perspective, but then that's a whole other realm when you're talking a commercial space. And that's something that thankfully the local code officials, fire marshals and inspectors, and also insurance companies really clamp down on with businesses that are like, you have to get that. And I'm sure that's something you see as well, that kind of knowledge gap of, like this is something that it's not a one-time thing when I start up my business or my property, it's ongoing maintenance, inspection, and testing.
Sure, yeah. I mean, it's just like probably a lot of the other equipment or products that they have in their building, depending on what it is, it's no different than their HVAC system, out there, or, whatever. So, yeah, definitely education from that aspect. And, that's why we preach, longevity of a product, quality product out there, so that, you're not just buying this to, replace this. You're not just buying this to, buy a new one in a year or 2 years from now. We want to continue to have that those units serviced and maintained so they can last you a lifetime, and you get that value back on them as well.
So we mentioned eatery, restaurant, just a general property, and a lot of folks see them interior, right, inside businesses and places they go, usually right by the door, maybe back by the bathrooms when you go out to eat on a Friday night. What are some places that code requires, or you see it often, an extinguisher placed there in a commercial or industrial setting that probably folks wouldn't think you need, or you would want to have a portable fire extinguisher in that place? What are some kind of unique settings maybe?
Yeah, I mean, sometimes it's as simple as they're not even that unique. It's just, you have to sometimes connect the dots for folks. And there's a lot of scenarios where, if you really have a discussion with someone, there's common sense, like, a fire could start here, obviously, but the connection of, well, shouldn't there be a fire extinguisher in that spot then, is just kind of missed. And I think there's a lot of areas where we could do better with fire protection. I think, anything when it comes to construction, any type of, work that's being done in that level, I think that's a big opportunity. I mean, how often, do we see where a fire started on a construction site or renovations were being done, and maybe they had something, maybe it was out in the truck, maybe, they were relying on the building that had something, but they didn't know where that fire extinguisher was in the building. So that's an area that I often see as a large gap just in general. I mean, in my 20 years as a firefighter, we saw countless fires that were started, there's no blame on contractors, but started with a contractor, someone doing work somewhere, and there just wasn't anything there, so to caddy on to that, anything with a vehicle, that's another opportunity, another aspect where people often don't think. You've got the vehicle itself that can catch on fire for a variety of reasons, whether it's, the vehicle itself has maintenance problems, an accident or something like that, but also just by product of that vehicle being there and you attach to that vehicle, you're going to have a fire extinguisher generally close by wherever you are. So there's a lot of aspects like, I always say, hey, if you have a job or you have a company where the vehicle is a core component of that, you're driving around on a regular basis, whether that's in a passenger vehicle, that could be a work truck vehicle, a municipal vehicle that's out on the street every day doing public works type work, snow plows or things like that. Those should have fire extinguishers on them, to protect the driver of that truck, the asset of the vehicle, and whatever else they're encountering out on the road on a daily basis. I mean, even think down to just a rental company, rental cars, things like that, those should really probably have some kind of fire extinguisher in there every day. You've got a different person driving it. Who knows what that guy did in that vehicle the last time you were there, what condition it is. So it's about protecting the asset and the person that's driving out there as well.
I think those are some great examples. I think the construction site one with a contractor is like, well, if you're kind of in that construction build out type of phase, then the fire protection systems aren't in place yet, right?
Yeah.
So you're not going to have a alarm system with a notifier that's going to let you know. You're not going to have a portable within a couple steps or arm's reach to be able to do that. So I think that's a huge point that a lot of folks don't think about, is that you should set up a temporary type of fire protection plan for a work site, let alone having something in your work vehicle, your personal vehicle, whatever your transportation. And then there is that off-road vehicle suppression as well that Kistler O'Brien does offer as well, with some great product lines to be able to protect not only the machinery, but those in the cab and everything along those lines too, if we wanted to truly get into the weeds there. But speaking of the products and different product lines, there's other different manufacturers and folks that are in the fire protection space, all offering different, product offerings out there. What makes Amerex, the kind of manufacturer of choice, one that we've had a long-standing relationship with between Kistler O'Brien, as a leader ourselves in the life industry, we love being, a manufacturer partner with top quality products and companies like yourself. So kind of why Amerex really?
Sure, so Amerex, we've got a very high quality standard to our manufacturing process, and I think that's what we really, kind of carry ourselves on top of. We are, Amerex is great stewards of the industry, and, in a world where things are continuously being commoditized out there, we feel that a quality extinguisher that, like we mentioned before, can be serviced, can be maintained, and is built for longevity is really what this industry needs and demands and requires out there. It's what our customers require. And, so us building products to the highest standards, ones that are, meant to withstand out there in the field, not just be replaced at a 6-year maintenance or an annual maintenance or a 12-year lifespan and you throw it away. That's something that we're very passionate about, and I think that's truly what makes us stand apart. In addition to that, we've got a product that's manufactured in America, down in Trussville, Alabama, where our headquarters is based. And our entire product line is manufactured down there in that facility. That includes our wheeled units, our hand portable units, and all of our vehicle and suppression systems.
So, all great points. We're a commercial fire protection company, right? Yeah. But we have a walk-in service at any of our 3 office locations. We get a lot of foot traffic coming through our Bethlehem location about that, and that's folks that are thinking they can get the more, kind of residential grade ones that have the plastic nozzles refilled. We educate them on that, but we do sell 2.5 pounders, 5 pounders, even 10 pounders for folks' home use. Kind of what would you say to those that, feel like they should, right? Maybe they're dipping their toe and getting some better fire protection for home. Kind of what's the recommendation from you guys to say, hey, this is what at baseline you should probably have at your home, even if it's not something that is widely known, but something that you guys recommend.
Sure. I mean, at the end of the day, people should have an extinguisher in their home. Obviously, whether that's something near the kitchen, something on every floor. It's kind of like, how they want to do that. Sure. And how they can afford that. That's best for them. That's great. At the end of the day, myself, I would push, as long as you have an extinguisher of any kind, you're doing something right, right off the bat. When it comes to, Amerex, a more quality brand, if you have a person that thinks, hey, I am probably going to buy this, put it somewhere, and maybe not do much else to it for until I need to. There's a good chance I'm not going to remember to get it inspected, or I don't want to get it inspected. I just want to have it somewhere to sit there, and when I need it, it works. And that is the biggest thing I could speak to buying a quality unit, and one that's not maybe a disposable or a cheap version, because again, when you need it, and you need it to work. So if you know that, hey, I'm probably not gonna, do anything to this, I'm probably not gonna get it inspected, it's gonna be maybe in my garage and moved around a lot and banged around a lot, you want that much better of a unit to ensure that, when you need it, it is going to work. When you pull that pin and squeeze it, there's not going to be a problem. There's not going to be a plastic component that is broken, that got bumped or something like that in the time of you shuffling it around, and it's ready to go.
Sure. I asked this question to a lot of our guests. You mentioned you've been in the industry for decades now, so I think you're a great candidate to ask this question. What's one prediction you have for the industry kind of looking forward here? Maybe short term, maybe a little bit longer term, but what's something you see as someone that's a life safety expert yourself that's on the horizon?
Yeah, so I think we're at a tipping point right now in our industry where we're going to see a lot of changes and unique things happening as we move forward here. And a lot of that is driven by just everyday environment and the types of products and things that are being invented and created out there, things like lithium-ion batteries, electronic devices. Overall, we are carrying more powerful devices, powerful products in our homes, in our vehicles, in our offices. Every building, every room has got something that it's got its own power source to it, that much more than previously. And I think that we are going to see a change in fire protection that we haven't quite seen in the past, come in the future here. So what I mean by that is that we're going to see, whether that's a lot more products, changes in codes, changes in how some of these products are used, beefed up protection. I think we're just going to see a lot of nuances and changes coming to the industry in the, immediate years.
Sure, yeah. A lot of technology entering properties, entering workspaces in particular, and now the codes have to catch up to that and really figure out what's the lay of the land, what needs to change in the protection plan to make sure that folks are, properly protected and safeguarded with these new potential hazards that are going on in any property that they may walk into.
Yeah, absolutely.
Very good point, Chris. And Chris, you made a lot of great points in this conversation. I appreciate the education, the insight, and obviously you giving us a few minutes of your time today.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for having me on.
You can check out Amerex on their website, Chris on LinkedIn as well, to learn more about. He puts a lot of great photos up there of their portables in the wild and some other great educational tips and insight. We appreciate all of you for tuning in for this episode of the KOB Podcast. Until next time, I'm Tyler Trumbauer with Kistler O'Brien Fire Protection.